two parents who just buried a child, a husband sneaking around, meeting in secret with another woman, and a truth that shattered one of Y&R's most beloved couples. This is the story of Nick and Phyllis's affair. One of the most devastating and intoxicating stories that The Young and the Restless has ever told. In 2005, Nick and Sharon lost their 15-year-old daughter, Cassie, in a horrific car accident. And it was a loss that changed everything. Their home changed, their marriage changed, and Nick changed. The grief they were experiencing took them both in completely different directions. And instead of bringing them together, it started pulling them apart. Nick was looking for someone to blame for his daughter's death, and that person was Phyllis's son, Daniel Romalotti. In the end, it turned out that Daniel was not directly responsible for Cassie's death, but nobody knew that at the time. Nick was furious, as any father would be. He was convinced that Daniel had been driving drunk with his daughter in the vehicle, and at the same time, Phyllis was convinced that her son was being railroaded. The controversy over Cassie's death was so intense that Daniel actually ran away from Genoa City. He fled to Malibu with his then girlfriend Lily Winters, but Nick was not just gonna let it go. He and Phyllis joined forces to track Daniel down before the police could. And that is what put Nick and Phyllis on a collision course with something more personal and more dangerous and ultimately impossible to ignore. They were constantly in the same orbit, searching, arguing, comparing evidence, reliving the same nightmare over and over again, just from completely opposite sides. Nick wanted to rip Daniel to shreds, and Phyllis wanted to protect her son. And when they finally caught up with Daniel in Malibu, Nick literally chases him down on the beach with Phyllis running behind. And when Nick finally has Daniel in his hands, he chooses mercy, maybe in part for Phyllis's sake. When it was revealed that Daniel wasn't driving the car the night of Cassie's death, Nick had a lot of soul searching to do and a lot of drama around that realization. But none of it changed the fact that Nick and Phyllis were both exhausted by that point. They were raw. And that's when it happened. The first kiss. Not a full affair. Not at first. More like a shared trauma expressing itself, an understanding. But that understanding slowly turned in to something else. Nick and Sharon were barely holding their marriage together. Nick was shut down emotionally, and Sharon was drowning in her pain, and they just weren't reaching for each other anymore. Nick was reaching for Phyllis, and it didn't stop. It very quickly became a full-on affair. Sex in hotel rooms, sex in the stables, sex at the Newman Ranch, right under Sharon's nose. And the more Sharon tried to pull Nick back to the life that they shared before their daughter's death, the more he seemed to be drawn into the flames. Sharon knew something was wrong. Nick was having a lot of late meetings. And, truth be told, at the same time, Sharon was doing a lot of leaning on Brad Carlton for emotional support. And while that relationship would too later cross a line, Sharon was still trying to save her marriage. And then comes the moment that Sharon can't ignore. Sharon sees Phyllis shopping at a boutique, buying a sexy piece of lingerie. And Phyllis is glowing, yet secretive, suspicious. But savvy Sharon doesn't confront her right away. She does something smarter. She buys the exact same sexy piece of lingerie, and she doesn't wear it for seduction. She wears it as a polygraph test. Sharon lures Nick to a hotel suite at the GCAC, a surprise romantic rendezvous from a wife to her husband. And when Nick walks in, Sharon is wearing the sexy lingerie that Nick has already seen on Phyllis. Ooh! Nick's reaction told her everything she needed to know. He didn't look at her with desire. He looked at her like he had been caught. Oh, but this scandal did not just destroy Nick and Sharon's relationship, because Phyllis was back together with Jack Abbott. By 2005, Phyllis and Jack had already been married and divorced, but they were reconciling and living together. That's right. While all of this is going on, every time Nick was betraying Sharon, Phyllis was betraying Jack too. And although Sharon was the first to discover the affair, Jack didn't find out from Sharon. Jack found out because he walked right into his own living room at the Abbott mansion and saw Nick and Phyllis huddled up together, trying to figure out how they were gonna cover up their secret. And after that, the jig was up. there was nothing left to do but confess. Sharon confronts Phyllis, and this was not a calm, quiet conversation. It was angry and raw. Sharon knew that this hadn't just been one time, one mistake. It had been going on over and over in secret while she was mourning the death of her daughter and trying desperately to hold her family together. Phyllis tries to explain what happened and brings up Cassie, but Sharon shuts it down immediately. Don't you utter my daughter's name out of your lying mouth. And Sharon and Phyllis don't just walk away from this. They're not going to become two women with just one terrible fight behind them. No. This becomes the foundation for years of accusations, power plays, public confrontations, even prison time. And of course, Y&R fans taking sides every single time Sharon and Phyllis show up on screen together. But that moment, the moment Sharon confronted Phyllis over the affair with Nick, that was the moment that something died and then something else was born. A legendary soap opera rivalry that would last for decades. But maybe it all could have ended there. Maybe Sharon could have forgiven Nick. Maybe Jack could have forgiven Phyllis. But then Phyllis becomes pregnant. And we don't know who the father really is. Could be Jack, could be Nick. Jack believed that he and Phyllis were rebuilding their life together, planning a future that both of them had hoped would include children. They tried in vitro fertilization in the past, but they were unable to conceive. Phyllis actually had a life-threatening reaction to the fertility drugs and nearly died. So for Jack, this betrayal was a triple threat. His partner was pregnant. His stepson could be the father because, yeah, he was married to Nikki too. And the miracle baby that he had spent years praying for was finally happening, just not with him. In 2006, a DNA test was done, and Nick was the only one who saw the results, and he claimed at the time that the baby was his. Now flash forward 7 years, and in 2013 that paternity test came into question, but it didn't ultimately change the outcome. This was Nick Newman's child, not Jack's. Sharon divorced Nick, Jack divorced Phyllis, and Nick and Phyllis eloped to Los Alamos, New Mexico for a roadhouse wedding. No flowers, no caterers, no Newmans, no Abbotts. Just Phyllis in a white dress that hugged her baby bump, and Nick in a flannel shirt. It was offbeat, off-road, and off the charts. In that dusty tavern, in those moments, they weren't being branded the big line cheaters of Genoa City. They were just Nick and Phyllis, bound together by the secret that they kept and the child they would raise together. From the heat of Los Alamos to the winter of Genoa City, it's December of 2006 now. The city is in the middle of an ice storm. The power is out, and Phyllis goes into labor. The baby is late and breech. Nick leaves Phyllis at Newman Enterprises to go get her hospital bag. But on his way back, everything goes wrong. Cell service is out. The roads are dangerous. And Nick finds out that Daniel has been in a car accident. Nick stops to help Daniel, desperate not to lose another child. And meanwhile, Phyllis is stranded at Newman Enterprises in an elevator with Jack. And Phyllis gives birth right there in the elevator, with Jack helping to deliver the baby. The baby that he had hoped had been his. By the time Nick finally gets there, his daughter was already born. Summer Newman, a child born of one of the most controversial relationships in the Young and the Restless history. Phyllis and Nick weren't just another soap opera affair. Their relationship lit a fire. And not just on screen, but off screen too, with the Y&R fans. Because the viewers had watched Nick and Sharon practically grow up together. They fell in love, raised their children, and had already overcame so many challenges. They survived Sharon's lies. They survived Grace Turner's scheming. They survived Matt Clark's torture. And right when it seemed like nothing could tear them apart, Cassie died. And everything changed. Some viewers never forgave Nick for straying, emotionally and physically, at a time when he should have been supporting Sharon. They should have been supporting each other. And the truth is, if I think too hard about that even now, I'm still mad at him too. I am forever a Nick and Sharon fan. But for me, the heat between Nick and Phyllis was also undeniable. It seemed like half the viewers were rooting for Nick and Sharon, and half the viewers were rooting for Nick and Phyllis. And that debate never really ended. To this day, fans still argue about whether Nick and Phyllis were true love or a mistake that never should have happened. The real lasting legacy of Nick and Phyllis's affair is that it was emotionally nuanced. It was painful and real and believable in a way that soap stories sometimes aren't. This story took its time. This story showed how grief can change people. and how one event, one moment, one decision can ripple for years. So, I'm curious, where did you stand back then, and where do you stand now? Phick or Shick? Leave me your comments and let me know your thoughts.